Okay, so today we're working on a 2000 Chevrolet 2500 with a 6-liter gas engine, and the customer reports that it has a miss. The check engine light has been reported to be flashing, so we're going to do a scan on it. I suspect there's going to be a misfire code. It's a code Y, which makes it a 2000. It probably doesn't support automatic ID. Oh, it does. Okay. Funny, the Duramax I worked on yesterday did not. And it's a 4-speed automatic. It's not California emissions. Codes menu, display codes. All powertrain codes. Survey says, interesting. Bank lean, bank 1 lean, bank 2 lean, misfire detected, knock sensor issues. So it's probably got the usual knock sensor wiring harnesses corroded off on the knock sensors. Random misfire. Now either it's running lean, truly running lean, or it's got a misfire both. It's hard to say which codes happen in what order. Before we clear the codes, I want to look at freeze frame data for the misfire and see if it was just the last key cycle. GM supports enhanced freeze frame and failure records. So let's have a look at misfire detection here. If you clear the codes, you're going to lose all this data, so it's always wise to view this, possibly record this. I'm curious about short-term fuel trim. So it was at -4% on that bank, -8% on that bank, but adding 14% on long-term. So it's within 10% either way. So it's not a fuel trim problem, not when the random misfire occurred. Let's see, the vehicle speed was 37 kilometers an hour, and it had been running for 2.5 minutes roughly. Okay, well, let's go back and look at these fuel trim codes and see how long ago those set. P0174. Well, isn't that special? Long-term fuel trim on bank 2 is plus 22% when that code set. So it's adding fuel like crazy. So it's either running lean to a vacuum leak or low fuel pressure. But the other bank wasn't running lean. Long-term fuel trim on bank 1 is only 5%. That's interesting. Yet it does have codes for running lean on bank 1. Let's check that one. Mileage since the first failure, 1,650. Mileage since MIL, so it's a while ago. 1,650. Where's long-term fuel trim? Bank 2 is at 21%, and bank 1's at 18%, -9, so it's actually +9. And over here it's -10, +21, so it's actually +11. You add those two together to get a net effect. So let's look at misfire counters again before we clear codes to see if actually the misfire over the last 10 drive cycles is strictly on data display. I think it's in here. Misfire data. If it was really random or if it's confined to one bank. When I drove it in the shop, it felt like it had a dead miss. There's 37,843 misfires on cylinder number 2. Cylinder number 4 has 3. Cylinder number 6 has 58. Cylinder number 7 has 101. So I think our problem is on cylinder number 2. I'm just going to save this recording. File, save, collect the data. Put it in my GM folder. P0300. Oops. Okay, so we're going to have a look at spark plug, plug wire, coil, injector on cylinder number 2. First of all, we'll try and qualify that it is cylinder number 2 that's actually got the miss. So I did a visual inspection of this number 2 ignition, and number 2 plug wire and coil wires and injector wires, and I didn't see anything. I want to see if there's a live misfire right now. Ignition control circuits seem okay. 1357 current. So right now it's showing a miss on number 2 and 6. And some misses on number 4 as well, 2, 4, and 6. I wonder if it's running lean on that bank. Definitely number 2 and 6. Let's have a look at the fuel trims on that bank. Well, the fuel trims are skewed like crazy. 25% additional fuel on both banks. Let's reset the fuel trims. See if that makes the miss worse or better. Bring up the fuel trim here so we can see short term and long term. So you can see 17 and 25 and a quick reset. Oh, that's nice. Snap on. Data disappears when you bring that up. When you clear it. I don't remember it ever doing that before. To the fuel trim here. Now it's in open loop even. Wonder if we have a skewed oxygen sensor reporting a false rich condition or false. No, the fuel trims are positive, so it'd have to be a false lean condition. What happened to the fuel trims? Fuel trim data. Well, there they are. Well, it's gone to open loop, and it seems to be running fine right now in open loop. I'm going to shut it off and restart it. So I want to bring up the oxygen sensors on bank 1. 2 sensor bank 2, sensor 1, and then the short-term to long-term fuel trim. It's funny, the bank 1 oxygen sensor looks like it's working, but the bank 2 oxygen sensor, sorry, this is bank 1 sensor 1, bank 2 sensor 1. This one definitely, bank 1 sensor 1, bank 2 sensor 1. So bank 2, which is the side of the end of the cylinder number 2, is flatline lean. So I think we got a failed O2 sensor. But it's still in open loop, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm going to shut it off and restart it and watch what it does. Look at the fuel trim on bank 1. 35%. Bank 2, 52%. How could it be doing that when it's in open loop? I'm going to try and shut this off and restart it without losing this recording. See if it'll go to closed loop now. It must have an active fault code. Now, why are both of these sensors reporting such a lean condition? Let's look for an induction leak. Well, look at what's happened to short-term and long-term fuel trims. On both banks, it's adding 25% additional fuel. I think it's running lean. I think it's got a vacuum leak, so I'm going to smoke test this thing. Some smoke coming around the bottom of the EGR valve. That's strange. I wonder if the EGR valve is stuck open, but why would the smoke be coming from around there? Interesting. Normally I would go to the brake booster, but being a 6 liter, this has hydro boost, so I went to the fuel pressure regulator nipple on the intake manifold. Definitely smoke coming from around the base of the EGR valve. We'll have to investigate that. Well, I don't know if this video is going to show very good, but if you look at the base of the EGR valve, there is a intake manifold convoluted pipe that carries the exhaust gas back into the intake manifold, this pipe right here. And it's leaking out of that pipe, so there must be a pinhole in that pipe that's coming down the insulation tube. You can actually see it seeping through the side of the... Let's turn the light on here. You can see it seeping through the side of the pipe here on this asbestos coating, so there's something wrong with that EGR pipe. So here's what I've done. I've disconnected the EGR valve from the cylinder head so we could carefully move it off to the side. I pulled the exhaust line, which would be under intake manifold vacuum, out of the intake manifold. I put a hydraulic cap in there to plug the hole, and I reinstalled the air induction system. I'm going to reset the fuel trims and start this thing up and have a look at how it runs now. So let's have a look at fuel trim data now. I've reset both fuel trims. It's in open loop still. This thing stays in open. Oh, it just went to closed loop. Short-term fuel trim is adding a little bit. Bank 2 is at 13–14%. Bank 1 seems to be okay. Let's have a look at misfires now. There's number 6 missing. Let's clear all this. Went back too far. Make sure the codes are all gone. And they are. Misfire data. So all the misfire history is cleared by clearing the codes. It's still counting misfires on cylinder number 6. Show me fuel trim in this one. Well, let's have a look at number 6 now, see why it's missing on number 6. That definitely made a difference. There's definitely a vacuum leak in that EGR pipe going from the EGR valve to the intake manifold. But it still has a miss on number 6. So here's the plug out of number 6. Although it's a little bit worn, it doesn't look bad. No signs of carbon tracking on the insulator. No pinholes in the boot. Now I didn't check it for spark. I just took the plug out and had a look at it. I couldn't isolate it to number 6. It's not a completely dead cylinder. So I'm going to try and swap this plug to another cylinder and check for spark on number 6 as well. So I got the spark tester on number 6 and it shows consistent misfires like crazy, obviously. We got good spark quality on that cylinder. Now, given the fact that it's missing worse now with that spark plug disabled, I think we're dealing with a fuel problem. So I had moved number 6 plug to number 4 and reconnected the plug wire now, and you can see that there are misfires being counted on cylinder 2. Cylinder 6 will show up once in a while, and occasionally cylinder 4. So I'm starting to wonder if that cat is maybe restricted on that bank. The fuel trims are normal, but it's affecting 3 out of the 4 cylinders on that bank. The other side just shows no misfires whatsoever. Now I'm going to remove that EGR tube off the manifold because it's got to be replaced anyways, and that will open up that exhaust port, and we'll see what happens. So I removed the EGR tube off of the exhaust manifold on the right side. I had to heat up the manifold, otherwise these 2 bolts would have probably broken the manifold. That assembly needs to be replaced. I'm sure that's how it's serviced as an assembly. My theory now is that, similar to removing an oxygen sensor, removing that pipe from down here should allow the exhaust to breathe, and if it is restricted, the misfire should be gone on this bank. You'll see. So now we're running with the exhaust open on that bank, and it still shows misfires on number 6 and occasionally on number 2. And nothing on the other bank. So I don't think it's a restricted exhaust, which is a good thing. I could actually check back pressure, but normally if the exhaust was restricted, it would run perfectly fine with that exhaust leak. So I guess we're going to have to do an injector flow test. So I peeled the insulation off of this EGR tube. Remember, the smoke was coming down from around the bottom of the EGR valve, and there is pinholes rusted through the EGR tube. So I don't think I can repair this because that's cheap stainless steel. We're going to see if it's available even before we try to do anything with it. That has to be repaired. That was a vacuum leak, but it still has a miss on cylinders 2 and 6, with number 6 being the worst. It's not a dead miss. When I disconnect the injectors or the ignition coil on those 2 cylinders, it gets even worse. So I'm going to do an injector flow test. I've done a relative compression test, and it seems pretty stable, or pretty even across all cylinders. Okay, so we've set up to do an injector balance test using the Varus. Most scanners will do this with bidirectional controls, and a fuel pressure gauge installed on the fuel rail. Got the fuel pressure gauge hooked up over there, and the phone ringing. So the way this is going to work, we're going to use the scan tool to energize the fuel pump, and then we're going to fire the injector and note the drop of pressure. So we're going to try number 1, which is on the other bank. Runs the fuel pressure gauge, or runs the fuel pump. Glare on that thing. Let's try up here. So roughly about 55 psi, and we're going to fire number 1 injector. You can hear it firing, and it dropped from 55 down to about 42. Okay, so we're going to continue on to number 2, which is a suspicious one. And again, fuel pressure is around 55, and I'm going to hit continue. Well, that wasn't conclusive. That dropped about 42 as well. Let's try number 6, because number 6 is worse than the others. Number 6 is a cylinder that's consistently calling for misfires. So we're going to inject injector number 6. We started out with, boy, I got the shakes today, about 55 pounds of fuel pressure. And that looks the same to me. Okay, plan B. Maybe we'll do a real compression test in that cylinder. Well, I'm running it again now, and the fuel trims on bank 2 have gone crazily positive, 52% on the short term and 25% on the long term. So I'm going to disconnect that forward oxygen sensor. So here's bank 2 sensor 1 oxygen sensor connector behind the right front wheel. I've disconnected it, so it'll disable it. Bank 1 sensor 1 is there. Bank 2 sensor 1 is up there. So we disabled it by disconnecting it electrically. And if that would force that not to run in closed loop, and if it runs better, then we should be on the right track. So I've got that oxygen sensor on the right side, bank 2 disconnected. I'm going to reset the fuel trims again. So the fuel trims should be reset. Data, misfire data, and we're going to fire it up and see what kind of magic happens. Now it's showing consistent misfires on number 2. Well, I never did check the plug on number 2. No misfires on number 6. Now, mind you, misfires on that bank will cause it to add extra fuel theoretically, and that could have skewed the fuel trims, but it can't do that now because it's an open loop. Well, let's have a look at number 2 spark plug. So I removed the spark plug out of number 2 cylinder, which I probably should have done a long time ago, and lo and behold, it is carbon fouled. The tip of the spark plug is burnt off, and it is carbon fouled. Wow. Well, we'll put another plug in there and see what happens. Still counting the odd misfire on cylinder number 6, but putting that a different spark plug in cylinder number 2 sure made it run better. Every once in a while it counts a miss on cylinder number 6. I'm going to clear these again. And the way to clear the misfire counters is to go into codes, clear codes. You can do it while it's running. Continue. Back. Data. Misfire data. It definitely feels smoother. It's obviously burning oil on number 2 cylinder. If that plug was oil fouled, carbon fouled like that, but who knows how long it's been in there. Okay, so we're going to recommend a set of plugs probably, and obviously that EGR tube, and hopefully that gets a few more years of life out of this old girl. Well, it seems that EGR tube is available, and I was right, that's how it's serviced, the entire assembly. But it's not cheap, $387 list. They don't even have a genuine GM part. And let's see where it's stocked, check more locations. ETB50 is standard Blue Street, and no stock anywhere in Canada. Well, I'll have to make some phone calls, I guess now on Tuesday, considering Monday's a holiday here.